get here? So, and what, yeah, right. So how did we get here and what is here? So as I said, my first introduction when I was about 17, 18, and that was around when, things got going in terms of what we understand the internet to be. Then, it was a very new thing called the web. It was mainly just pictures and text. Institutionally generated content. So whether you were a university or you were a business that got on early, like the dominoes that I mentioned, it was mainly just pictures and text and informational. It was a one-directional conversation. And then we went into the Web 2.0 where it's user-generated content. So that's like the social media as we know right now. So you have two-way communication where companies send information in or publish information and users can actually generate content from sharing and tagging to blogging. So therefore, you have the social media sites such as Meta and all of its other sub-brands, going down to things such as sites like LinkedIn. So we are now entering the 3.0 stage of the internet as we will know it. Monetization of user-generated content via visual experiences and technologies. And all that is saying is, up to this point, right, user-generated content isn't really profitable or isn't really at a stage where users can generate the amount of revenue or generate a monetization scenario like how corporations can. So yes, we see companies successful such as Meta, and we could go on and on about the corporate side of stuff, but are users getting paid? Even on social media, we do things for likes just to get social recognition and affirmation. But are these people really getting paid for their user-generated content? We know Facebook is, and you basically send away a contract saying that Facebook can make revenue and it has access to your content for advertising and revenue generation purposes. Next slide, please. So some key terms, Metaverse. I think Margaret did an explanation of that, virtual reality, but what I want to focus on coming all the way down are two areas where I think we should pay particular attention to as our reality is augmented reality, right, and NFTs or NFTs. So in terms of augmented reality, I think this is the biggest area that is the most exploitable at the moment. An enhanced version of a physical world where, sorry, one moment, please.
Mary versus Gina.
Right, the physical world that is achieved using visual elements, song, and other sensory stimuli to deliver via technology. So basically the key, I guess, entry point would be mobile phones. So using mobile phones to enhance the experience of the real world. And of course, non-fungible tokens. So we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I think this is the single. Can somebody mute their mic, please? I think non-fungible tokens is the single biggest opportunity for all content creators, especially in the creative sector. So at this point in time, non-fungible tokens basically have come down to digital works of art, whether it be audio, video, or visual, and being able to actually sell them and have royalties of pictures and video long after it has been sold to maybe the first person. You can now sell, some person else can take up a graphic because it is basically not interchangeable, right? Meaning that you can't change it without changing the actual original form that was in, so you can't easily copy it. So at this point in time, it's a unique piece of digital content that a person that owns it can sell it as an asset. Next slide, please. So where are the areas? So my presentation is focused on where should we be looking to develop, either from educational and business experience, or how can we make money? Where I see immediate need is education development. So training and facilitation preparation to exploit Web 3.0, aka the meta internet, is part of what we're doing right now, and is a single biggest opportunity to get the country familiar with the concepts of the meta internet or the metaverse. Right now, there's a huge gap in our education system that needs to be more flexible and fluid, allowing education to be more adaptive to technological trends. If you think about it, what really has changed in our core educational structure post-independence? We still have the basic maths, English, history, which is great. But right now, if we're going to actually participate in this new verse, this new reality of doing business, living and creating content and being part of a connected world, we can't simply sit back and think that the CXCs that we have empowered our people to have as part of their education experience is going to be enough for this new world. So educational development, and not all has to rest with government. You have opportunities where people can create new educational opportunities to facilitate national adoption, I think is needed. Next slide, please. Create new business value. One of the things that I've seen over, and I've started my company doing web development over 25 years now, and representing one of the oldest web development firms in Barbados. This part has been the most difficult for the Barbadian business community to understand, which is, yes, you have a business in the physical world, right? But the virtual world being online needs new value. It needs a new value proposition. And that means that you don't go and create the same thing that you can do in the physical world online. There's no new value there. So for example, to give example, supermarket shopping, reading labels in the rural cannot be linked to video product reviews via augmented reality. And if you think about it, if most people right now have mobile phones, they shop, they have experiences shopping, they may even have a little list in their phone in terms of what stuff they want to get when they go shopping. But imagine now if you can go into a supermarket and you can basically use augmented reality to basically go over a carton of milk, a container, a loaf of bread or whatever, and pull up not just in the ingredients of the particular product or any sort of warning labels, but actually now see the opportunities of a recipe for that particular item. So when you go over, you take your phone, you go over the product and see the possibilities of using that particular ingredient or any other information associated with that. That's creating new value, new business value. But what we tend to see is websites that basically list the same items that appear on the shelf. And that is thinking 15 years ago, but it's not compliant with the metaverse. You have to create new business value and new experiences to actually take advantage of this, because if not, the metaverse isn't going to make sense. You don't want to take what you existently do and put it virtual. There's no new value. There's no new opportunities in that space to do that. Next slide, please. All right. So novel experience is the key. Utilizing the methods that will offer help and a helpful guide to business success. So option for Barbados and the Caribbean is to participate in my mind, the meta internet via augmented reality. It's the lowest barrier to entry for most of us. It's the easiest building block. Example of that is projects where Barbados tourists can basically pull up. Maybe if you think about it, if you look at Bridgetown, there should be AR Bridgetown, where you go from a statue to a building and get additional information on that building. So imagine using Bridgetown as an example. There are many monuments and buildings and statues and so much rich history and culture that if you take your mobile phone and go over it, it gives the person an enhanced experience of what Bridgetown was looking like maybe 100 years ago, with some old photographs that we have a little bit of narration where when you look at the building, this is what the building used to look like 100 years ago. This is what old Broad Street looked like 100 years ago. So whereas they're walking through Broad Street, they're getting a whole new experience by using their mobile phone and connecting to what Barbados was. That's part of a tourist upgrade, I think, that we can take advantage of right now. It doesn't cost for much more investment in technology. We already have the basic tools available to us. You can download them. A lot of those kits are free, and we can start creating right now and participate in the metaverse at this early and infantile stage. Next slide, please. All right, so where are the quick wins? Culture industries for sure. Nifties are creating new wealth faster than any other investment vehicle right now. Of course, cryptocurrency is right up there, but I believe where our young people can take advantage of, your young people are very, very creative. We have some of the most innovative young people, and you see it from all the memes and all the different types of content that comes out as soon as something happens within a community. So therefore, if you could imagine that we can create non-fungible tokens that are available on the market. So maybe it's a picture of our Barrow in terms of how you saw him as our leader, all right? We really miss an opportunity, right? If we were masters of our own value. And what I mean by masters of our own value, if we really understood how much our culture and how much we have in terms of our value and identity as a people, Barbados would have had an NFT collection, a digital collection that would have been sold on various markets when we transitioned to a republic. So imagine a graphic of, our digital representation from, Union Jack to Barbados flag, and it's 3D. So you go from Union Jack to this, and now to some other image of a new monument, a new piece of identity that represents the republic. I think the diaspora would love to see us get to a stage where we are representing ourselves at this high level and creating content from our young people and our content creators that is up there. They want to buy into Barbados. They want to buy into digitally who we are. And I think there's an opportunity to capitalize on that and have all of our national heroes as part of a Nifty collection. So imagine our national heroes up there. When you click on one of the Nifties, it basically gives you information about, from Rihanna all the way back to Sarah Gill, who these people are, what they represent. And you can now start to build out a culture industries Nifty collection, where we now probably have our own marketplace because we're creating our own value. Next slide, please. All right. So basic SWOT analysis in Metaverse in terms of our reality. We have a solid infrastructure. There's no doubt about that. Right now, I have the basic internet in my house, 100 megs. And I'm hard pressed to see why I need to upgrade at this point in time. All right. Our education capacity is right up there to take advantage of it at the UE stage. We have solid programs, but we just need to connect a little more. Our young people are hungry for something different. A young friend of mine would start buying NFTs. He's about maybe 18 years old, and he bought a non-fungible token of I think an NFL player, or I think a basketball player. The image of the particular player that he was affiliated with. Now, our young people are spending foreign exchange, buying foreign goods, foreign digital goods. Once again, I have a problem with that. There are no digital goods available for sale. That means we are leaving major food on the table when our young people don't have a vehicle to sell their own goods. But we are buying these digital foreign goods and services and supporting foreign markets without having any other vehicle for us to create our own value and profit from it. So what are the weaknesses? Our education system doesn't lend itself to interdisciplinary collaboration, meaning that the programming department of the BCC doesn't necessarily do a joint project with the creative department that does graphics. So therefore, the likelihood that we would create digital tokens and graphics and stuff like that are NFTs is highly unlikely, because you do not get the two players together or the two disciplines together to create something new. It's kind of like if you're, splitting your cell. So you're creating from programmers, you're teaching other programmers to be programmers, and therefore you're kind of splitting yourself, as opposed to, interchanging with graphic developers. So graphic developers are not talking and building new projects. So therefore, I've always said, it'll be very interesting to see if the graphics department of BCC, as well as the program department of BCC, had to do a joint project. So you had to pair with a graphic developer and create something new. Not just create the old tried and true thing of write a program and then the graphics department people do a piece of artwork. No, have that interdisciplinary collaboration. That's where new wealth and new understanding comes from. Our finance, we are still yet to master the basics of internet-driven business. Yeah, we are still at a stage right now where our websites, and that's the first tip into the metaverse world, because it's a key building block. Websites are still a key building block, even though we're into social media. We still haven't mastered the different stages of websites. Our financial system doesn't allow for participation of the fintech world. I had one bank manager that told me basically that depending on which bank you go to, you may or may not be able to buy cryptocurrency. And I'm saying, if you're going to ask to be part of the metaverse, you ask the citizens of Barbados part of the metaverse, we have to solve this problem this year. We have to solve the problem where if I go to a bank and I use my credit card, that I should be able to buy cryptocurrency as easy as I buy any other good or service. It should be no different. I can take my credit card, I can take my Visa debit card, and I can buy into certain services. There should be no reason why banks withhold the ability to buy cryptocurrency like any other form of any other good or service. So where are the opportunities? Expansion of the international business sector through fintech. I think that right now we already have a very rich international business international business sector, and that could even get stronger through fintech if we do the right things. All right, new revenue possibilities for the culture industries. I mentioned that in terms of NFTs and creation of that, and enhancing the tourism product through augmented reality. So those are the current things right now that we can take advantage of. So if there's one takeaway from my presentation, is that the metaverse is not any one thing. It's not just cryptocurrencies. It's not just NFTs. It is what we make it out to be and where we see the advantages to be. And right now, those are the three key areas. We talk about low-hanging fruit. That is the low-hanging fruit. Strengthening the international business sector through innovations in fintech, allow the culture industries to grow by helping them to understand what their opportunities are. Because every time you buy a NFT by some foreign content creator, you are basically strengthening their wealth and value proposition. We need to put our young creative talent in the market as well and strengthen them, because when they become financially strong and stable and successful, they hire other Barbadians. They hire people, they hire other young people that need an opportunity as well, right? But we lack awareness. One of the reasons why BIPA has put on this seminar today is because there's a general lack of awareness of what the metaverse is and where we are going. And you cannot have a public that is on board if they do not understand what we need to achieve. It must be a unified national vision. Discovered in the banking community is great. Discovered in the banking community concerning being able to participate in this. Because if I was told that if I go to Scotiabank and I get a Scotiabank Visa, yes, I can buy cryptocurrency, but I'm with a particular bank that will not allow me. And I'm saying, and I spoke to one of the managers and they said, well, no, they don't allow it. So I'm saying there's discord in the community. If we're going to participate at this high level, it must be solved, and it must be solved this year. The slow pace of adoption, education, business. Last slide, please. All right. So why is the metaverse so important? It will inspire a bustling new economy at every level. It may not be every level for us, but remember, there are secondary spin-offs to a particular industry being successful. I remember back in the early 2000s, when tourism was booming and we had an international business sector, it seemed that every sector in Barbados was doing well because we had key strengths in certain sectors that basically spill over into other areas. So whereas for content creators and culture industry practitioners, it means another source of monetization. If you strengthen those weaker industries, it's only going to help firm up the ones that are pulling the country along. A crypto-based economy also look for a fair incentivization of content and regular royalties. So yes, being able to actually sell a digital piece of content over and over and over again while collecting royalties only goes to strengthen what our young people have as an option for their future. We are talking about the next iteration of the internet, and it's a trend that we can no longer afford to miss, right? It's offering our young people the next generation of economic prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I do think that was very informative, and I would have just stepped in there because I stopped sharing the slide. I'm going to hand you back over to our moderator, Mr. Dwayne Henry, our Vice President.
All right, good afternoon again, everyone. All right, so we would have come to the end of the presentation that Mr. Williams would have had. I don't see any questions in the chat from Mr. Williams, so I guess we will be going on to our next presenter, Mr. Jeremy Stephen. I have a quick introduction on Mr. Stephen.
Just do the one that you know, no read about you. When I was asked for the bio today, you know me personally. Just say you lost. Honest to God. If I remembered it was you, it was just say, look, you know me. Go ahead, man.
So that means I just gotta say that you went to the esteemed institution called Waterford University, and that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
And I didn't sit the class or nothing more.
Well, we have the introduction. I will hand over to Mr. Stephen at this point in time.
Cheers, man. Thanks. No, I don't actually like to hear my intro being read, my bio being read. So I was just being polite. Miss Leon and I had just met, and I handed it over, and she was reading it, so be it. But if it's being I used to slightly cross the back of your head before it was texturized. So I just wanted to say hi.
This is my natural hair, by the way.
No, that's not good. But I just wanted to say good night to some people I've seen there. Very early on when I logged in, you know, want to say hi to Professor Depperdine, one of my former bosses, and I know it's by the name of Troy Carrington, also the same university. I wanted to say good night, Stephen. How you keeping? Barry, Jordan, how you keeping? Crystal, how you keeping? I see Kofi in there. He even got something foolish to tell me when I done, so I can be on my ear game right now, particularly. I was tasked with looking at the economic end of the metaverse, if there's such. And if the sad thing about it all is that it's rather early in the game to really look at the economic benefits of the metaverse. The concept was very granular, remains to be extremely granular, simply because you've had a lot of technology available to you, but the case or the truth remains that even though the technology has been available, and maybe some can argue the computing power necessary to facilitate a metaverse has been available for probably the better part of 15 to 20 years, you had a paucity of interconnectivity. A very good basic example, believe it or not, came up in what Stephen was talking about, where he talked about a paucity of interconnectivity, namely the fact that you've got a number of use cases available, but the technology hasn't necessarily been created, or let's say has been designed to really solve or to add any benefit to any particular use cases. So the best example would be, again, Stephen, I said that there's really been no digital products coming out of Barbados, and I'm paraphrasing. If I offended Stephen, that's your problem. But no, seriously, I'm paraphrasing what I imagine Stephen was talking about, where he mentioned that there was a lack of digital products, and even to say that there are quite a few. You got photographers like Jared Nels Morris that have been putting out a good bit of NFTs recently on OpenSea. You got the likes of Chantel, the singer, the very famous singer. She's been one of the big wigs in this new NFT, I guess, design towards the music industry, people becoming their own middlemen. You've got, I don't have her name, but I know who exposed her locally recently, the artist by the name of Tef, you know, Tef Hinkson. He has a series going on Instagram right now, literally telling the 18 and the 19-year-olds, the 17-year-olds, and using other Bajans that young, how to actually sell on OpenSea, create your own non-fungible tokens. So ironically for me, that remains the primary issue in terms of use cases, where everything seems rather isolated. And as a result, it's very difficult to imagine what the economic impact will be. But allow me to guess for a moment. If we were to imagine, again, using all the definitions that Stephen nicely laid out before us, what a technology, any technology is supposed to do. Fundamentally, from an economics point of view, all we care about, I'm really not economists, but all economists really care about is productivity. The use of capital, and in that capital, there's technology and money in order to return some benefit, financial benefit to capitalists. Tied into that is entrepreneurship, which is just innovation. And then on the other end of the spectrum, labor. And if we were to look at money and capital as one and the same, then the metaverse actually allows the money/capital, labor, and entrepreneurship to fully operate in one space for the first time. In that, in order to produce on a basic level, the products needed or the services needed that drives many a service-based economy here, and production or hard product economies, if you want to call them that, like China, towards greater productivity, you've now created, or there is now for the first time in human history, the platform under which all of those, let's call them ingredients, combine. So, for instance, we are having a speech right now, and it is acceptable to each of you to actually have a panel discussion on Zoom. Now, of course, there's all the kinks, and everybody's trying to ratify how well you're supposed to use Zoom, what's the new protocol, how you're supposed to address people. All of that has to be worked out, right, as time goes on. But the fact remains that I can actually have a very legitimate conversation that's treated as something that's productive, that adds value to a wide cadre of people. And that is even more acceptable now than me actually speaking in front of you guys. I could bet most people right now would use this forum. And this is part of the metaverse, if none of you really guessed it so far. This isn't my real representation. I'm actually delivering something of value to you right now. In fact, I could have made money. I didn't charge, but I could have issued or asked Ms. Leon to issue each of you a Jeremy coin. And that would give you probably further access to talk to me afterwards. And we can dig down into, if it is of interest to you, the legitimacy, the economic legitimacy, the financial legitimacy of the metaverse as it pertains to your own businesses going forward. So particularly, what I'm saying is anything that can be raised in terms of productivity, any activity is part of that said metaverse as defined by Stephen. If you can integrate elements of augmented reality, you've got that right here in Zoom. The fact that my camera has no aperture, all right? Apertures is just a change in the size of to put it simply, of not the lens itself, but the hole of the lens. And there's no change of that, and yet my background's being blurred out because somehow there's a piece of software that's able to look at me and do a digital representation of me and separate me from what might be viewed as a background, the entirety of me. So that's the augmented reality. Then the ability to actually bring full commerce online. And the great innovation that is cryptocurrencies really, really dealt with that over 10 years ago with the advent of Bitcoin. That is, how can you create a system A for the first time that doesn't need a central authority to legitimize transactions. And then B, because it can legitimize transactions, it therefore is not subject to double spending. We've witnessed 12 years of innovation since then. So ironically, as you all well know, since it's using basic cryptography, one could argue that, again, Zoom is all part of that in terms of my, my example that I'm using. So I wanted to broaden your mind now to economic impacts outside of just non-fungible tokens and tokens in general, and the commercial value in which is exchanged once some type of transaction happens. What can be made productive? Let's start to single them out. You can improve tourism without having to talk about digital representations of art by using the same technology, non-fungible tokens, and even AI. Perfect example is what I saw when I went to Silicon Valley. When was it again? 2017 or 2018. When I went to, I visited Apple's headquarters, and they were really previewing, they had released AI, the augmented reality development kit for iOS the year before. But part of their experience was actually AI. I was looking at a blank piece of board, not AI, shucks, keep saying the wrong thing, augmented reality. And part of the experience was literally everybody was looking at a table, you took the iPad up, there was no Oculi or Oculuses at the time. You had no need for the iPhone, you took your iPad up, and you literally could take an inside tour of the Apple campus, of the campus in Cupertino. And for me, I was like, well, whoa, imagine if that was done for tourism. Imagine what that could do in terms of adding an additional feature to, say, Harrison Cave, for instance, where there are parts that some tourists will never view, never be able to somehow because of maybe a disability or general health concerns. It may be insurance related, whatever the case may be. Yet that's part of an added attraction that you could add, and somehow is built into the metaverse. They might not even have to be local in Barbados, and you're offering local tours of a country but they might not be as real, but the experience is at least somewhere there for them. And that might be the youngest amongst us that would see that as valuable. I'll go as far as to even say that when you think in the area, which I believe is the biggest opportunity for the Eastern Caribbean logistics, I will live and die on that sort, right? One of the best use cases for the metaverse is in logistics. I mean, right now, pretty much the likes of, who was it again? Walmart, for instance, very good use case. They, in the very early days of Ethereum, would use smart contracts, a very bastardized version of it, really, in order to track a produce from its creation, say a tomato grown, or better yet, a banana grown in Mexico, Chiquita or something. And they're able to track freshness because somebody is able to attach to the blockchain a digital representation. It sounds like an NFT, but it wasn't called an NFT back then. It's called color coins. And that representation on the blockchain was updated given the different phases of transportation to the shelf at some random store in the United States of America. And given the, again, the availability, given the innovation that has happened in the cryptocurrency space, given the fact that NFTs are now the avant-garde of cryptocurrencies, really, in a sense, given the general comfort that people have with pursuing commerce and e-commerce globally, from the corporate side and from the individual consumer end, you would find more and more of that farm to table model that I explained just though happening. In other words, companies are able to even adjust pricing in real time based on the freshness of any fruit that they're importing. That has benefits for Barbados if Barbados voices up and recognizes that the largest opportunity that we do have is in logistics, i.e. via transshipment, for a reason that I wouldn't get into right now. Even something that I did rather recently is null and void in about 15 to 20 years. I went and got a commercial pilot's license. Cost me all out $100,000 Bajan dollars to do. And, you know, I sometimes think I'm crazy for doing it. But the point being is in about 15 to 20 years, if it were that I wanted to be a pilot only, then the fact remains that I'm out of a job, given the fact that you've got a flying car. And given the fact that I should be able to control said flying car through blockchain, because the networks you will use in the future, the whole idea of Web 3.0 is to migrate from central ISPs towards any and everybody can provide processing power to a network. That's the whole, that's the end game of blockchain technology. Any and everybody in a decentralized fashion could provide some measure of either capacity, proof of capacity, or power, processing power to a network. So to form a network. So my point is I should be able then to control a plane or a car in a few years via the blockchain. And using augmented reality, place myself as if I was in the cockpit or in the driver's seat. And I'm able to do cargo runs all up and down the Caribbean, you know, and that is a business that is at least, if again, our regional governments wise up to it and probably begin from a financial point of view, encourage the banking sector, because they're going to be key to this, to wise up to the advantages that could be served by allowing the use of crypto. You know, this stands to be a major opportunity that can, it wouldn't lower, because I don't see the prices ever lowering or being lowered in our regimes, but it could at least abate any drastic rises in price in the near term and allow us in the Caribbean to do a little more when it comes to moving goods between ourselves. And that is the major end game. And for me, and I'm throwing a number here, that more than doubles the size of the Caribbean economy in about 24 years, if it's done perfectly, because essentially you're removing friction. And anybody that did any basic macroeconomics knows that if you remove any variables that are lending themselves to friction in any economy, the economy either grows or it overheats. So if money is too cheap, interest rates are too low, you're removing that blockade from persons being able to borrow. it inadvertently leads to inflation down the line, hence what I'm referring to as overheating. So generally, I mean, I from those 2 point of views, and I'll end with one, just so I don't ramble on too long. But basically, when it comes to those 2 elements that I spoke of, the logistical and being the prime one, I don't see where this does not benefit any economy in the long run. There are some headaches getting towards that point, and Stephen eloquently covered those. But the one that bothers me most is when Stephen mentioned or criticized the educational system. I'll go one further, where the educational system in the Caribbean, not just Barbados, in fact, when you go to the likes of Jamaica, Trinidad, and Guyana, it's actually worse, even despite the fact that their so-called best tend to perform much better in the entry exams on average than a Barbadian probably ever will, because we are not encouraged to take 19 CXCs, for argument's sake, showing my age by saying CXCs, but or CSEX as they will call them now. But at the end of the day, most of the learning is rote. Rote learning isn't really conducive to 2 things. Number 1, innovation. Number 2, being nimble. The ability to actually re-skill your population is key to the success of the metaverse within the Caribbean. And ironically, the slower we are towards reskilling the population, and it doesn't mean all have to be programmers. Somebody's going to come up with drag and drop options very soon for building a blockchain. I can see that within the next 10 years. The fact that we had Wix just after Web 2.0 became trendy lends me to believe that somebody should be able to build their own NFTs anyhow down the road if that's what they want to pursue. And for me, that isn't a big opportunity anyhow. But if people are upskilled or reskilled, you can actually find a retardation, for lack of a better term, of the economy long-term, where consumers, as we are right now, we're net consumers, are more likely to remain consumers or consume even more. And the irony is that with the advent of Web 3.0, as Stephen mentioned again, that was meant to even more empower the consumer, as I would relate to them, the net consumer. You would find less value being created, or there will be a net benefit to those created in economies that have become nimble with the use of that technology. A very good example, children nowadays are more likely to follow a YouTube page of a 6 and 9-year-old reviewing products online, mainly because, you know, in Barbados, it can't be paid on YouTube, that's one argument, but they're more able to, let's put it this way, they're more able to adopt, or these children from outside are more geared towards the production of content versus the consumption. Up to now, even if people consume in Barbados, it isn't necessarily done with the knowledge of how to make that content appealing to people outside of Barbados. In other words, I think it makes more sense to adopt the likes of the metaverse if you're willing to be a net exporter of content and services. Otherwise, you will be swarmed and be forced into being a net consumer, all right? The final thing I will say on that, on this entire thing economically, is that the next, or I would say one of the more critical factors that we have to appreciate, and Stephen covered this stuff really well, is the hesitancy of the, I want to say regional, but really I'm going to just speak to Barbados, the local financial authorities to allow some semblance of innovation in the space. Now, it was very much well put together in 2018, the idea of a sandbox, which I knew was going to fail for many reasons, namely who was put to run it. But you know, the problem is that the the lack of education again in certain sectors, because to this day, I probably do want 1 or 2 speeches a month to these people in the banking sector, and they just don't get it. They see it as money, as opposed to it being information. It's no different to a security mail. I mean, that's the best example I throw at them. And whatever value is in that email comes down to the recipient and the sender. I could send you something and says, hey, like a Nigerian thinks you've won $1 million. It's up to you to believe that or not. Or I could send you a picture to make you laugh, and that's valuable. So the hesitancy of the financial sector, the hesitancy of the regulators to allow in a sustainable manner fintech to take off in the region allows me to know that even if we're talking about the metaverse, and you gotta thank Gabriel Abed for kind of forcing the hand of the government, in my view, by making that announcement through Yahoo. But at the end of the day, if they do not understand what a network is, essentially all blockchain is a network. And then the average Bayesian is out there 10 years later, looking at the supposed value of just transactions on a network and thinking that is the value to it. I don't really think we are going to be able to capitalize on the metaverse in 5 to 10 years. I could almost guarantee I'll be celebrating my 50th, no, I aged myself even too much, my 48th birthday. And we will be still talking about these issues in about 10 years. So Troy just asked me a question about how far I believe we are. Well, 15 years, 15 years, 15 years. Honest to God, 15 years. And a lot of it has to come down to just certain actors being in place. The fact that the Central Bank of Barbados, and I know this for a fact because I was one of 3 people that introduced it to them back in 2011, 2012, when Gabriel, Oliver, and I went to the Central Bank through my introduction. And I tried to tell them, well, look, this is something that's coming, let it come true. This is how you could regulate it if you want to, or you could just let it breathe and then monitor to suit. And it was a flat no. And it was only after leaving the central bank that the former governor became a champion of it. But the current governor is scared of it. And depending on how long he wishes to stay, like you basically have a cutoff point. I'm not afraid to say this. When he leaves is when you could probably say, well, look, we got a chance. Otherwise, no, it's not going to happen. He generally just doesn't trust it. I don't know if it's from a technical point of view, but my point being is that any explosion that you wish to find in the economy, and this is my last sentence, will come from the invitation of somebody outside. Some large Canadian firm, this is the model, the tried and true model, but some large Canadian firm or somebody comes in and decides, hey, Metaverse, I'm giving developers jobs, I can bring X amount of foreign exchange to the country, and then you will probably see people being hired in this space. But I think that would kill the innovation as necessary in a wider cadre of industry that could benefit from it. Logistics, education, as Stephen said, health, tourism, the cannabis legislation. Oh Lord, that's another one. If you look at how long that's taken, right? You could, and given the systemic reasons why that's not allowed to take off, it lends me to think that the whole idea of metaverse will take forever. But again, holistically, an economy that embraces this, just look at how Estonia is going to write it out, that embraces this concept of the metaverse without the frictions that I just spent the last 5 to 10 minutes lamenting over, is one that will grow rapidly, especially if it is outward facing. It can't be about producing videos on TikTok for your friends. It can't be just using filters for your friends. It can't be just that. Else, it's just us being consumers all the same. Dwayne, I hand back over to you. Thank you.
All right, Jeremy, thanks for that contribution. We actually have one question. Jeremy, I don't know if you saw this. Do you think that the Barbados Embassy will survive in the metaverse?
It's a waste of time. I mean, shucks, if I call the embassies, no, I can't ever get through. You think that it'd be any better because it happens to be in the central land? Nah, look, a major part of this reform, I didn't even bother to speak about this because Stephen covered it particularly, is about structure, is about the structure. And then I spoke about friction. The major friction in Barbados is service delivery, right? I myself fall victim to it all the time, where I think I got more time than I really do, or that the value or my perception of value is different to what the world of commerce out there says is valuable. So the way we perceive time is one of the reasons, or one of the headaches that setting up a metaverse in the central land will bring about. I mean, 15? Yeah, this year will be 15. About 15 years ago, I was an avid Second Lifer. I don't know, you guys by a show of hands could tell me how many of you were into it heavy, right? But I was, instead of studying during my master's, I used to be heavy on Second Life. And there was a friend of mine who, he's no friend from Australia, that created his own stock exchange on the on that version of the metaverse on Second Life. And it was rather successful because it ran just like how a stock exchange should in real life, despite having that augmented reality or virtual reality aspect to it. You were on a computer screen, you went outside, you saw the bull, like the bull on Wall Street. You know, you saw people coming out and in. I used to go in there and trade a few things when it was ready, and it worked. If the people or the algorithms, if we want to talk about AI, if they're not functioning well, or unless we decide, the government decides that they love Stephen, that he can write all the algorithms necessary to you know, the bots necessary to correspond with anybody who wishes to engage our metaverse embassy. You know, it ain't gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work the way we think it will. I would say if we can abate our cultural norms, it should work. I would say that because it's a first, it's gonna take much longer to develop than you would think. Somebody else is going to get it right. And mainly because I guess they're more willing to fail. And I think a metaverse as an initial project is a waste of time, because governments typically, just by the very basis of how government structured, they're not innovative. So failure should not be an option, but something like this should be allowed to fail. I would like to see it, however, succeed. Let me leave it with that, despite my tone.
Okay, and well, finally, I don't think this is a question, but this is more of a point where someone is saying that it took a pandemic for the banks to partially embrace e-banking and PayPal in one part.
No, it wasn't the pandemic. I mean, shucks, Michael Corbin on here, you could see, it wasn't the pandemic. It's the pandemic plus falling profitability of banks within the region. The bank, look, part of the parcel of why the banks were so slow to innovate in the region had less to do with technology that was available and just pure on finance. And back in 2015, the region actually was bleeding the Canadian banks out. That was a word that was used in an Economist article I read back then. I used it as a case study for my classes that I taught at uni. It bled out. RBC was bleeding really bad because of Jamaica, hence why they're gone. Sagicor took over and their assets over there. So for me, part and parcel, they were always not willing to innovate in the region simply because the region was an expensive place per capita to operate. All right, that's why innovation was always slow first and foremost. When it came to the setup cost of technology, trials, the alpha and the beta testing, everything that sounds fancy, they weren't willing to spend that money versus having, you know, being able to set up in a 23 to 30 million person environment in Canada, and likewise for the American banks, short of 300 million people thereabouts using their services globally. It didn't make sense for them to do it. The pandemic allowed it to happen maybe, but parts and parcels because the banks are looking for other ways to save money. They're not making money through loans, they're making money through cutting expenditure primarily if they can cut it. So it must mean allowing PayPal to operate given the regulatory burdens they had initially with PayPal. That being gone would have removed a lot of compliance costs. So for me, it's not the pandemic. Honestly, if it was the pandemic, they might have fired a few tellers, but no, I'm not saying that they should go home, but that would have, if I had seen tellers going home by the bundles as opposed to pre-pandemic, then I would be saying, yo, these fellas really taking this pandemic exercise carefully because people are willing and ready to do more e-banking and m-banking than ever before. I don't want to see a teller. I hate to see tellers, right? So like, I don't know. I don't agree with these sentiments, to be honest.
Okay, no problem. All right, we have some more questions or comments, but we would save those till later because we have one more presenter, and then at the end we can take a general panel discussion where you and Mr. Williams and the other gentleman can hash it out a little bit more. So at this point in time, I will be introducing, where is my screen? I'll be introducing Mr. Christopher Derrell. Mr. Derrell, are you there?
Yeah, I am. You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Well, I can ask you now since Jeremy cut me off. Do you want your introduction or you just hand it over to you?
No, man. We don't know each other yet, so you could get through that a little bit.
No problem, no problem. All right. So Mr. Christopher Derrell, he's head of web development at Intelligent. Chris is an award-winning software developer who in his role manages UX architecture and development to create practical and aesthetic websites. These websites have spanned across multiple industries, including banking, hotels, and engineering from Barbados to Rome, while being recognized globally as leaders in technology innovation. He has 7 years of experience in software development and holds a Bachelor's of Science degree with honors, I may add, in computer science and economics from the University of the West Indies, UWI Mona. He led a team of web developers at Intelligent and also co-leads a Youth Can Do It IT, a social enterprise teaching youth aged 7 to 25 the power of data and code, while working on their mindset of becoming creators, not just consumers. All right, so at this point, I would hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. I respect for that. All right, I have a presentation. What I'm going to do is just send the link to Margaret because I didn't get a chance to earlier, but we don't need it to get started. So I'm just going to kick it off.
It's okay. You can
share the screen.
present it. Yes, you can present.
Yeah, you can go ahead and present.
Thanks. All right, so the angle that I'm going to be taking it from is in line with both Stephen and Jeremy. But one thing I wanted to just start off by saying is that I know many people on the call today would have been on the call from the CTU earlier. And it was a very interesting call. I got to catch pieces of it where they discussed the metaverse on a whole. I learned from it. I thought it was a very informative call, but I don't think that's what the value of this discussion is. Like, I love the thought that the first slide that was on the screen said the metaverse, a discussion. I think that is what this really should be and is. That's where the value is going to be. Because one thing that the call this morning lacked was this level of interaction, where we have 71 people on the call who are actually willing to discuss the metaverse rather than just be presented on it. So I just want to start off like this is a call with a different set of value. And I love what I heard so far. And the funny thing is we're in line on a lot of things, Stephen and Jeremy, but we do differ on some things. And I hope that I can make part of my presentation clear on that. So let me just start right now. All right, Dwayne, just let me know if you see my screen.
Yeah, I can see the screen.
All right, cool. All right, thanks. So this is just a short discussion about why the metaverse. Stephen covered very beautifully what the metaverse is. And I'll be the first to tell you that while looking online for a description of what the metaverse is, as well as asking other people, even the people you expect to know what the metaverse is, can't describe what the metaverse is. And that's because the term is relatively new. It wasn't born with Facebook renaming themselves. It's been around for a couple of years, maybe since 2017, it really picked up steam. But the metaverse has a very dynamic description. And so in one sentence, the way that I found it is that it is a network of shared virtual worlds, right? It's a network of shared virtual worlds. And the important parts are virtual and shared. The people that are on these platforms are interacting with other people. You're not going to find a metaverse where you're sitting down by yourself drinking coffee and calling it a metaverse, because the very word itself came from meta, meaning beyond, and verse, meaning universe. So it's beyond this current physical universe. So that's the metaverse in a nutshell. Now, for us in the region, and I can only speak to Barbados because that's where I'm from, and Jamaica because this is where I live. Can it really work, right? And why do I say can it work? Well, the truth is the metaverse itself, although the term only came about a couple of years ago, or really took on steam a couple of years ago, it's been around for decades. As Jeremy put it, like Second Life was just one of the ways that you could access the metaverse because it was a virtual world. For anyone who's played Sims, going further back to RuneScape, going further back to World of Warcraft, you've interacted with a metaverse. And it wasn't just games for gaming's sake. It was things like online communities where you had a virtual avatar and you could interact with other people. Any shared space where you were interacting with others was part and parcel of this metaverse. That is what it was before it had a nice, shiny name. But for us in the region, can it work? Because unlike Microsoft, we can't just go and buy Activision Blizzard for $69 billion and make the largest technology deal in history, actually, for a gaming company and say we're in the metaverse now. It's a little late for us to try to come up with our own HoloLens or come with our own Oculus Rift and try to replace those that are the market leaders, right? So can it really work for the region? Yes, it can. And it goes back again to Jeremy and Stephen's presentations. We have a couple things that are advantages that I've said to everyone, and especially in web development or anything internet related, the Caribbean region has some unbeatable advantages. Now, not to be controversial, but I'm just gonna list the three of them. The first is our location. Right now, we are right in the vicinity of those high spend areas. We're right in the vicinity of Canada. We're one flight away from Canada. We're one hop away from Florida. And even South America, where there's a lot of investment going on right now in technology companies like Rappi. We are one stone throw away as well. The second thing is that we speak the same language as North America. There's no reason why persons in North America should be going over to India to find software developers or persons who they can outsource knowledge process to, when we are right in their backyard, speak the language and have the education. And the time zone is the third thing. We're literally on the same time. It means that when we are working on a project for a 10 o'clock deadline, at most it's like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock where they are. There's no, I'm trying to get an update while my developer is sleeping or vice versa. Those are benefits and powerful areas that we should capitalize on. And the metaverse is one of our areas or one of the tools that we can do that in. There's a popular saying that says, when the gold rush is going on, you don't want to be the person going down into the mines digging for gold. You want to be the person who's selling the shovels. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind as we go forward, looking at how the metaverse is going to be something we capitalize on. We need to be the persons who are providing the shovels so people can get the gold. So I saw this graphic online and I said, boy, in case anybody didn't get any of my jokes up to this point, they should definitely be able to get this one. And it was really an interesting graphic for a couple of reasons. One, it has Meta on the metaverse bandwagon, and it has Microsoft because of their purchase of Activision Blizzard, as well as the popular HoloLens, which is a virtual reality headset that they've been working on for many years. And it's been rumored that Apple is also on that. They've been building their own, but they've been a couple years behind. And so the joke is that Apple is now trying to catch up with these other companies. But jokes aside, it shows that if the three biggest companies in the world, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft, are looking at the metaverse and investing so much money into it, then regardless if you think the metaverse is a real thing or not, and you're on this call skeptical thinking, this is just nonsense and another word, then this is something you need to pay attention to. Because if they're paying attention to it, it is something that we should pay attention to. I remember in 2013, 2014, when Bitcoin had minted its name as something that you need to know about, but it hadn't really caught on with many persons. People were still trying to figure out what is Bitcoin, and they had just heard about a new one like called Ether, and I think Ripple was out. And my dad was one of the first people that I knew that invested. He's on this call tonight. And he bought, I think it was 0.03 Bitcoin. And he gave me and my two sisters 0.003. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, this thing is expensive. If he can only give me 0.003 of a Bitcoin, this thing can't be like a real thing. This is not for spending. And so I remember I'm back in Jamaica. And a couple years later, the value, say it was $70 when he gave me, it was up to like $300. And I remember I needed the money for something. I think I needed to get a laptop or something. I can't remember what it was. But I was like, boy, this is not really working out, And my dad, in his grace and wisdom, was like, son, let me buy it back from you. I said, of course, yeah. Because in my head, $70 to $300, that's more than a 4 times return. I mean, who's winning here? I am. Lo and behold, the next year, Bitcoin jumps to 16,000. And it was a reminder to me while I was preparing this that there are many times that we want to ignore something because we don't fully understand the whole working behind it. But don't let that be our case on this call with the Metaverse. I don't think anyone on this call can understand the whole behind of the Metaverse because the Metaverse is still figuring itself out. Like I said, there are many definitions online. But don't be the person who ignores the Metaverse from today, just because you don't understand everything about it. Now, some examples of the Metaverse for you who are now interested in what a Metaverse is and how it applies to you are just a couple that I found online. The first is the most popular and the biggest Metaverse in the top left corner. That's called Decentraland. And Decentraland is a very interesting concept that I'm going to look at closer to the end of the presentation as well. But it is an online shared space where you can interact with others, but more than just interact, you can buy assets with tokens that are provided by Decentraland's, the owners of Decentraland. And it's very similar with the one underneath called the Sandbox. Now, what's very interesting is you can own land in each of these places. And I've seen jokes online that said that this is the only way millennials can now own land anymore. Because to buy land, whether in Barbados, Jamaica, or anywhere in the world, as a millennial is no mean feat. The one underneath is Horizon Worlds, and that's Meta's decentralized utopia. And that is their Metaverse platform where people can interact with each other. So remember, Metaverse is a shared space where you have your virtual presence, where you can interact with other persons online. You won't have a Metaverse if you just have an online system with just you or an augmented reality experience with just you. And the last photo is one I found on the right on IBM's Metaverse, where 4 proud, I'm assuming are Bajans. Maybe someone in the comments can actually give me more context on this photo. But this is another example of what we are moving to as a country, Barbados, with the Metaverse. And that is setting up our own, I was going to say physical, but virtual location on the Metaverse. Now, it's interesting that all of these platforms are owned by private companies, right? And I think that's where people are still going to have some sort of issue with the Metaverse. And that's something that I want to really tackle tonight. Because each of these is a private platform. There's no decentralized Metaverse as yet that is running on everyone's PC, just like the blockchain ledger, and that you can go on, because these still need to run on dedicated servers, just like Minecraft and just like other online games. And so the idea comes up, what is it that we're really giving up to get access to these platforms? And some of that is our privacy. Some of that is our data, as usual. But the point is that the people who are putting the money into the Metaverse right now are still the big companies. And so I believe we're still in the early phases of seeing what the Metaverse can be. Because if the world is really moving towards this decentralized application architecture, where, just to give a background, a decentralized application, which falls under Web3's manifesto, is one that doesn't run on an AWS or a Google Cloud. It doesn't run on the server in your backyard where you turn on your AC so nothing overheats. This is running on everyone's computer who is part of that ledger or that chain. And so you are verified and your website is validated by the fact that there's a copy of it or a copy of fragments of it on these multiple devices. And it allows for more transparency in the hosting, right? So this is where the world is going with the Web3 revolution. But none of these platforms are Web3 platforms because they need to run on these dedicated servers. And so I say that to say that the metaverse really is still evolving. We're just getting started with it here, but we're going to see something further on this development as we keep watching. Now, where is the metaverse on this curve? One of the things that I also used to do, which I can't remember if it was an introduction, but I also taught SAT mathematics. And so I would always tell the class that if you're going to draw a conclusion, you should draw, because you need to sometimes visualize what it is you're trying to figure out. This is a very popular diagram called the technology adoption life cycle. And it shows how every piece of technology follows this curve before it goes into the hands of the mass populace. And mass populace in this case would be where it hits late majority. So the first thing is that we have innovators, and these are people who seek out the product before it's fully finished. Like, they don't mind if it's buggy. Their benefit comes from being the person that said, I was the first to use the metaverse. I was the first to own a Bitcoin, even when you couldn't sell it anywhere. Innovators are the persons who seek out the software. Early adopters are the persons who have heard about the software, they get some advertising about this new technology, and they say to themselves, I'm willing to take the risk. And what happens with a lot of technology is that it never crosses the chasm. And the chasm is how you get from this early stage product to something that people are using. Many pieces of technology that you all are familiar with have fallen into that chasm and never returned. Google Glass fell into that chasm. Even as people were getting excited, it fell into that chasm. And I'm going to tell you about some of them that have affected us here in Jamaica right after this. Now, for the metaverse to really take off, it's going to need to pass over that chasm. And the way that it does that is through education. I think that's the word that's been said by all three of us tonight. Education has to be the core of how we get people past this early adoption phase to being in the early majority phase, where they see to themselves, okay, this is something that I see value from. I get value from coming onto this online platform. It's not just a trend. It's not just a fad. It's been around for a couple of years. And I know people who have gotten value from it. I want to be a part of that. And the only way we can do that is through education. So I'm going to close here with just an example, and then we can go into the discussions if there are any. But an example of a new platform that's just been launched here in Jamaica. It's called Link. Now, Link is a digital wallet. It is very similar to what M-Money was supposed to be. But really, it is giving people access to money that did not have it for a while. And the way it's doing that is through very quick, very fast transactions that are not linked to a bank account. So the important thing here is that it's not linked to a bank. People have been installing Link in Jamaica for the last couple months because there's a very lucrative marketing strategy where if you invite somebody, you get $250 Jamaican, which is quick maths, I think 4 Bajan, something like that. You get 4 Bajan for every invite that somebody accepts. This has started to take off and people are starting to see the value in signing up. But when you look for the adoption rates of people actually using the money that they get, it's limited. And the reason behind that is people don't understand why they would want to take this money that they've just collected, right, and continue to use it in this digital wallet format. Why wouldn't they just switch back to their credit card when their Link wallet is empty? Why wouldn't they just go back to cash? I mean, even before this presentation, I asked a couple people about their thoughts about Link. And one of them, he retails things like mackerel, sardine, he retails basically household goods to corner shops. And you try to introduce Link to him, he's going to say, and he did say, it's not the same as when you get cash from the Chinese man on the corner. When you give the Chinese man cash, and the Chinese man is not necessarily putting anything in a bank, or anything that can be taxed in a place where the tax can be calculated. It's totally different when you hand him that wad of bills or he pays you with just cash. For the person who's retailing goods to move to something like Link, it would mean that all of his customers had to move to something like Link. For the general public to move to something like Link, which is a digital wallet, it means that they need to be able to spend it at merchants who accept Link. And this is not a Jamaica only problem. I know that the EC has launched Dcash, I think it was either last year or the year before, which is their CBDC central bank digital currency. And they're getting traction because they're expanding who can accept it. But they're also investing in educating the public on why you would use this in the first place. Link is not the first digital wallet in Jamaica. We have had at least 5 wallets since 2013, from Connect to Quisk. And there have been numerous ones that kept starting and stopping. But the reason that they fail is because there has been little investment into the education of why you would use something like this today when you have seeming alternatives. How does this tie back to our decentralized future reality? If we're going to take the most advantage of the metaverse and all of the Web3 innovation that's going on, we need to be the persons who are educating ourselves on how to make the most use of it. Let us be the people that are actually selling the shovels and not just going in and digging gold. It means training up our software developers from young. It means teaching people how to create their own NFT, as Stephen mentioned earlier. It means making sure that people have digital literacy when it comes to the metaverse, so that it doesn't become a strange concept to them that they're swept over by. And it means that we, as we have always done in Barbados, need to just put a heavy focus on investing in education. And it's something that doesn't need to start at government level. If you wait on government to start education on the metaverse, we will never learn about the metaverse. It needs to start on the individual level of making sure you're educated on how to get access to this platform and how to make the most of it from now. And so that's really where I want to end tonight, because if we're not educated on how to use it, then we're going to fall behind the technology. And there's no reason for us to be behind in this digital world where we have everything at our fingertips. So, Dwayne, that's pretty much where I'm going to end. And I'll hand back over to you.
All right, that was a very informative discussion. And I do agree with you, Christopher, that, like, for instance, obviously I'm going to be unbiased here, but like, and money, in my opinion, was a very good idea. But my biggest problem with money was that I physically had to go to a bank to get cash to put it on their platform to go back to digital, and I was one of the persons, like, I'm one of those that you would call an early adopter. But my biggest issue with money was, if I'm using debit cards, credit cards all the time, which is more or less not is electronic money, why would I have to go to a bank, go to ATM to pull money, to go back now to a money merchant teller to load money onto my bank account? And I kept asking, when is the integration between the banks going to happen? And even if you didn't get integration between the banks, at least credit cards, like, let me go and load money up onto my my account via my credit card, and I would have had no problem with that. But I don't know what. Yeah.
Dwayne, let me jump in there, because sorry if the problem was with money. I pull my punch when I said there's discord in the banking community. Because I've always got blamed for being too blunt and too aggressive. But let's call a spade now in the discussion section. The banks are screwing up the whole industry, because either there is not enough regulation or the banks themselves see as competition. And let's face facts. As soon as we whittle down to only a few banks in Barbados, there's no incentive for banks to innovate. Absolutely none. This region has been a region where it has been secured money through low-risk investments such as housing loans for the banks in Barbados for many, many years. And for them to integrate money into their banking network, they're going to complain about every risk and every CYA aspect under the sun. And there's no reason why they would do it to expose themselves to competition or expose themselves to any new risk for being in business. And it was not Emily's fault directly.
Well, last year, though, because you know that Trini business that's supported by Republic Bank that has been integrated. So it wasn't that reason. So I can declare my hand.
And obviously, I know I'm supposed to be moderator, so I should be unbiased. But my whole thing is, Stephen, I'm sure that there's always a way around. But not disagreeing with you. But you got to understand that me as a layman that was using M-Money, I'm going to say M-Money. So I understand you saying it's the banks, but for me, it was M-Money just can't, I can't load up my cash. I gotta physically I gotta go from digital currency to fiat cash back to digital currency. And that step in my mind didn't make any sense. So obviously it wouldn't happen.
The biggest problem they had there, right? I know Christopher wants to say something, but let me jump there. The biggest problem I had with M-Money, I have to declare my hand because there may be a semblance of bias for anybody that knows me personally, but I'm a shareholder of them, right? So I can be as honest as I can be without breaking any contractual obligations, right? The main problem that you had, particularly, like Stephen already covered the banks, and the banks had issues particularly with bits. So let's put that down to timing and bank hesitancy. But there was one other issue. I had drawn that up, and it was too little too late. The problem was that it came down to education. The merchants were incentivized to actually provide a good service. So even if it were that, let's say some Barbadians were willing to be tolerant, you had cases where the machine wasn't working. You believe me, a shareholder, couldn't even load up my thing. I went in the gas station more than once and couldn't. And then the worst one, I'll call the name now, Emerald City. The machine was always down in there, and somehow BIT was never servicing it. And they used to drive me up a wall. How that part there was critical. It wasn't, for me, the fact that you had to take the extra step in order to load money onto Ed-Money. But it was a number of things. But for me, what killed it was the fact that as a customer, you had no satisfaction. You had no satisfaction with the service entirely, the entirety of it. Principally, the merchants were also a core problem. That was my thing.
Yeah, I want to add very quickly. You see the reason that you were able to say, boy, and money really annoyed you and you had a bad taste in your mouth from that. I had the very exact opposite with a software that one of the wallets before called Quisk. You see, Quisk was supposed to do as M-Money was supposed to do. And the banks here supported Quisk in allowing people to create a Quisk account if they had an NCB account, which is National Commercial Bank. And I remember specifically one day, I was here at the office and I had left my wallet at home and didn't realize till the end of the day. And I'm here saying to myself, boy, I have no card, I have no cash. How am I gonna get home? And then I remembered that because I have a Quisk account, I can go to any NCB ATM across the entire island. I don't have to put in a card. I can click Quisk when you get into the ATM. You just put in your phone number and your 6-digit PIN. Very secure, I know. And I got the money and I was able to go home. And I didn't need anything more than that to say, yo, this is the value of Quisk. You could literally, I mean, pardon the imagery, but you could literally walk in there in an underwear and you'd still be able to get the money from the ATM or make a purchase at a merchant. And I think that if the communication is more around the benefits rather than the product, like that, then people are going to find it easier to adopt these solutions, which are supposed to be solutions to actual problems. So that was one of my experiences with Quisk.
I have a question here from a David Smith, and I guess Mr. Williams, Mr. Derrell, or Mr. Stephen, not Mr. Stephen, Jeremy, can answer. Do the banks have the option to innovate, or would they lose their correspondent bank relationships if they did? Who wants to tackle that, or all three?
I can answer that here very innately, man. Very insightfully. All right, the corresponding bank relationships, there's a major threat, yes, particularly given the region's history with supporting the transfer of funds to the United States of America that could be linked to two things: narcotics, the sale and transfer of narcotics, and then, believe it or not, human trafficking. Right, the region is a major human trafficker or area of human trafficking. So as a result, you know, there's always been the issue, particularly when FATCA came about and some other globally pointed regulations came about over the last 15 years. That was meant primarily to protect the interests of Americans with respect to certain funds flowing from outside. Now, one can argue that if it is believed, and this has been one of the arguments up to about 4 to 5 years ago of the likes of, forgetting the name of the regulator in the US, but let's say the SEC for now. But there's another one that isn't coming to mind. That, you know, there was a high level of connection between terroristic activity and the likes of Bitcoin. That was one of the principal beefs. FinCEN, thank you, Pierre. Thank you, FinCEN. Don't know where that slipped me. Right. So these guys had a general aversion to it, and that pretty much pushed a lot of correspondent banking relationships more so to the negative end. The irony is that there was a period up to about 2 years ago or so, we're at the federal banking level, because there are 3 different levels to banking in the United States, but the one that we are most familiar with in the region based on certain brand names is the federal level as opposed to the state level and the regional level, right? And those federal banks, they pretty much were incentivized by FinCEN to lessen, or to let's put it this way, to really block a lot of transactions in the US. And this was a real issue up to about 3 years ago. But then the likes of Coinbase and I guess the lobbying of Wall Street, to a point, the fact that Wall Street got involved through the Winklevoss twins and the launch of their futures fund, which was linked to the investment in blockchain technology, pretty much incentivized the likes of FinCEN to champion the harmonization of different state regulations. So up to about 4 years ago, New York State had the most robust form, some people would say stifling form of regulation in crypto. And that has softened, and therefore it stands to reason in the US, once you're a US citizen and you're doing any transactions through the likes of Coinbase, so any platform really, as opposed to just personal wallets, hot wallets or core wallets, that you are trackable, your transactions are trackable, and as a result, nothing happens on your end. The same does not extend to regimes like ours in the Caribbean, where there's always the skepticism with respect to the source of funds for most of our activity. So one could always argue that there's that general fear, and I was just talking about the States. I haven't even spoken about Canada. In fact, Canada domestically is more open than the United States of America when it comes to crypto, but the view of the Canadian regulators and by extension, the Canadian multinational banks is that the same feeling or the same attitude should not exist in the Caribbean. Again, it comes down to the regulators, the likes of a FinCEN and whatnot. So there's that general apathy, A. But B, one could also argue that the banks themselves locally can lobby. Some of the banks would say that they will not do that. Some of the banks themselves might lack the authority to even begin to push. They may be pushing internally, but there's that systemic issue. And the systemic issue is basically the perception of overseas markets like ours and the legitimacy of funds passing through the system versus what can be seen as more transparent movement of funds within the likes of the US and Canada. I would tell anybody this right now, and anybody here is willing to challenge me. You guys may be aware that it's really easy to open a bank account in the US. You literally just need to walk into a banking headquarters. You don't even need to be a citizen or even have a social security number. Walk into the headquarters, you know, put your passport there. Legitimate reason you want the bank account. You don't want
foreign address, US address, foreign address, US address, and that's it.
But here it is, no, your foreign address as in where you come from, yeah, but you don't even need to give a local address depending on if it's a federally chartered bank or if it's a regional or locally chartered or state chartered bank. The state chartered ones are more difficult to get into. So believe it or not, and you can walk in and do your stuff like that. Like, there's that luxury is available. It's available. It's criminal based on the laws of many CARICOM jurisdictions. It's criminal to do it, but at the end of the day, that is there, and that's how many others. I won't open nobody in particular on the chat, but that's how many persons have been able to bypass the issues locally with respect to trading crypto. You might not be able to get on a Coinbase, but you might have been able to get on to some other platform that's US based for the time being, and you're storing your funds in the US. So, I mean, I say that part to say this, that even if the banks decide to block it, somebody's going to find a way around it somehow, right? Somebody or a great amount of people are going to find it somehow, is the truth. So the risk for the banks right now in terms of fines and the loss of corresponding banking relationships, which could essentially kill the ability of countries to import products into the region, is high right now. But it's going to lessen over time, and people who are ambitious are going to find a way around it. I end there.
Anyone else has any more questions or comments?
I think Davidson asked a question before, which was an interesting question. He was asking, if I buy land in Metaverse and the platform shuts down, what happens to the land that I own? First of all, I just want to say this whole thing is speculative. And that's the thing. One of the things that the reason why it is a saying rich people get richer is that they can afford to lose $50,000. If I have $2 million in the bank sitting in cash, I have no problem taking $50,000 and putting it in something that's highly speculative. All right. So if you're going to worry about losing money in the metaverse, right, at this early stage when it's undefined, my advice is don't get involved. Not in this type of speculation. There are other investment vehicles that you can do to generate wealth. But right now, virtual land acquisition is highly, highly speculative. And I wouldn't advise anybody to do it who can't afford to lose. Is like the early day coins, Bitcoin happen to work out for whatever reason, and you can go into those reasons, and their reasons are well known. But a lot of coins came up that just crashed and people lost their money. So it's the same thing with buying virtual land. They need to get insurance in such an eventuality. I would say there's no insurance right now that actually support, or reinsurer that would actually support allowing an individual to buy against that risk, because the risk is an unknown quantity. Land went, the most expensive piece of land, which is digital land, went for $4.3 million, which reinsurer is going to back that purchase? That doesn't have a guarantee. No, that's not going to happen. Insurance is not going to back that. And I've been working with an insurance company to bring cyber insurance to Barbados. And they're the only ones that are doing it. They can tell you the reinsurer is not going to back that. Given that many people in the region lack access to basic internet, what will happen with them in regards to the metaverse, resources, and equipment, or whatever? Once again, I don't necessarily agree that we don't have basic internet in the Caribbean. If anyone goes to look at the internet chart, right, in terms of which countries have the most access, the Caribbean is actually in the middle. They're not the lowest, they're not the highest, because that's like Singapore, Hong Kong, those countries. But and especially I think the highest is South Korea. Yeah, it has the highest level of internet to the home. Everyone has a basic gigabit to the home. I would say that we have enough. I go back to this basic building block. When Amazon was first online, they didn't have a meg of bandwidth to start Amazon. They didn't have a meg. There was no such as a megabit to the home. A megabyte to the home for Amazon to start. I think we have gone past the discussion of if people have basic internet. Internet is something, or having internet is something that really is passé away. Because if you have a smartphone in your hand, and right now I don't know anyone that sells a phone that isn't smart. We have over 300,000 people that have mobile phones in Barbados, and I can tell the percentage of smartphones is probably near 90-70%. So theoretically, you have more than enough bandwidth to access a decent internet to participate in the metaverse. Why? Because as earlier up in this discussion, I mentioned the metaverse isn't only the VR, but it's also AR, augmented reality. and it's building up so fast right now that there's no clear definition of what the metaverse is. So right now, if you have a mobile phone, you have more than enough bandwidth and to access it. If you have a mobile phone, you can take the Google paper mache type thing and build your own VR headset with your mobile phone. You can actually take that mobile phone and have a VR headset if you currently wish to do so. Google has shown you how to do it. So I think we are more than ready to participate. What we lack is the will and the national consciousness to do so.
I'm just going to jump in on the first question. Really, the digital land, David, I think that's a good, excellent question. And it's something that, I mean, I hope you don't have too much hope in humanity, because there's an ongoing discussion about this virtual land itself. And the problem that people have is people are recreating land in the metaverse or in a virtual space that is just as hard to access as it is in the physical space. And so people are asking the question, why would you have an infinite or seemingly infinite amount of resources and then make some land more expensive than other land, right? If you can teleport between any 2 points in the metaverse, what is it that makes land on the metaverse hilltop more valuable than the metaverse valley? So as Stephen said, it's speculative because people are placing value on this prime land that does not really exist, because they're just pixels that have been set with limited boundaries. But anytime somebody decides that the $4 million that you paid for that land is not enough, then the persons who are developing that virtual land can then expand their land mass, which is different from why land costs what it does on Earth. We have a limited amount of land, and when scarcity is there and demand is there, then the price will go up. So it is a very speculative environment, and it is going to be driven by a lot of greed. That is why land is costing so much money, like $4.3 million. Next thing though, is that don't get caught up on that number, because when I saw that article and I was like $4.3 million for this prime land in Decentraland, I remembered that it's actually the media that used the words dollars. But when you read down into the article, it's not dollars. It's $4.3 million value in Ethereum. And so that's totally different, because the persons who hold that Ethereum value, they definitely didn't buy it at $4.3 million. And not only that, they have limited places to spend it in the first place. And so those are just a few high value purchases that are going on by people who have limited ways to spend it. Otherwise, they can't buy lunch with Ethereum yet. So they're using the money or that ether to buy these properties in the metaverse. So it is speculative, and it's because of that fact that it can be infinitely expanded, which means that your investment now loses value because the land mass is bigger. Is something to watch out for if you decide to go into that. Just a couple things to consider.
Okay, Jeremy, we have a question from your good friend Kofi. He said, for Jeremy, as insightful as always, and thanks as usual. Key components of the metaverse include tech infrastructure, the human interfaces, which will be devices, decentralization, spatial computing, and a creator economy. Do we have these components sufficiently mature, developed, or in abundance in Barbados or the Caribbean for us to really take advantage of our economies to really see metaverse benefits at large?
Boy, I want to answer that question, Bentley, but it got to be split two ways. Yes, there are not enough resources available. But on the flip side, are the resources incentivized enough to actually act in the best interest? So I say that to mean this. Stephen would have just spoken about the level of internet penetration that's available. Innately, if you were like Rihanna, you got a child this year, or like Dwayne probably add to the brood, you would actually find that in a few years, those children would innately have a sense for technology or a feel for the technology that would have taken us a much longer time, and we all know this, to develop. So you've gotten, you have the platform, you're just given the general availability. And the fact that there's tools available for programming, pretty much everywhere. Apple Playground was one of the early innovators in that space for the likes of 6-year-olds and whatnot. Just using, as was said there earlier by Christopher, visually engage children into programming. You've got that bit of resource available for anybody as young as 6 to take advantage of. My problem again is organization and vision. This is something that Stephen, as much as he doesn't believe that I actually watch when he speaks, that I've seen him speak about several times using his own Facebook platform. And the main thing is just about vision. And whether, you know, because we all look to government, which I really don't like. I go to sleep at night bothering about the fact that people wait for government to do anything. But put that aside. The region, even our own millennial generation, and the Gen Zs, as I hear, are still very much of the belief that government must be the first one to take the risk. And you've gotten all these resources, you've got free education online available, that people could almost break off and do their own thing without even the government being any the wiser. It took me, well, all but 18 years of being socially aware to finally hear something on the election campaign that showed me that the government has to be led. Before, I always thought, you know, well, the people aren't going to be, us as the people aren't going to be aggressive enough to tell a government, yeah, this is where we need to go as part of the manifesto. But it's always been a case where it's close-ended and they don't regard what actually is going on around them, really, when it comes to formulating a manifesto. Manifesto should be as widely sought as possible in terms of the input. So what was said, and this was said down in Stephen's best friend Kurt Humphrey's constituency. It was said that there were people down in his constituency that were working online and that they did need to help the government know how people don't need to bail and working online and making money. And it hit me. I was like, that's the first time that I've ever heard government talk about an initiative where they must be led that actually should be their responsibility according to the way we view governance in general. So I say that to say this, Kofi, to be honest. You know, we have the resources. It is whether the initiative is there without government to lead and go about and take the risks, you know, engage the venture capitalists. The laws are there, if the laws are there to protect them or not, and it has been proven that you could attract venture capitalists into this region. The same bit was invested in by a Fortune 500 company, and Christopher is in Jamaica, and there was people from Google knocking around Jamaica for a while, investing in startups. I don't remember the guy's name, but there was one guy a good few years back that was doing it a lot. And there are people out there that can help us. It's about making a compelling enough package that says we are rebels, just like how Silicon Valley came about, and we're going to do things and we're going to shake up the place. And if that's done, governments will follow, particularly as their survivability and the populace at large's survivability is based or can be based on an explosion of tech coming out of this region. Is the truth. Hope I answered it properly. I know Kofi will let me know if I did it.
All right, I didn't see Kofi respond. He said, thank you, sir, cheers. All right, so this is another question, or well, another statement. Will the unpredictability and high levels of processing fees on the blockchain right now make any likely opportunity be a non-starter?
Depends on the blockchain. I ain't got no more to say. Look, Christopher and the rest of Stephen. Depends on the blockchain.
All right, and the next one, within the theme of contextualization, the metaverse, where would you put Roblox? The younger generation are encouraged to create content for virtual money on that platform.
I would, let's put it this way. My daughter, my daughter's 8 years old, and for her, this is becoming something that she expects. I would say that I encourage any sort of virtual platform that has a that has a structure for younger people. These virtual worlds, Fortnite and all these things where that may be attractive, don't have sort of the protections in terms of content. And that's one of my other pet peeves right now, because right now, Jeremy mentioned it, where we have children coming out that this will be second nature to them. But these platforms sometimes go after the adult market because they're the ones that have credit cards in their wallet. But a lot of young people need platforms to actually basically express themselves. Now, in terms of generating money, I think that there's an ethical question, because if as a young person, we still have to look at things like data privacy. We still have to look at what young people do in terms of exposing themselves to this level of technology. You still need to be a parent. I don't care if you know where your child is at physically, all right? You still have to be a parent. So for me, this is not as much a question about should they participate, but monitoring their participation. And yes, I encourage any young person to make money. I mean, why should you wait to 18 years old to make money? If you can make money in a cocooned environment, meaning that it's protected for you, so there's no, you know what I mean by that too, guys. So I'm not even going to explain what I mean by a cocooned environment, right? But there's an environment where they can grow, learn, and participate as a child, and is vetted, right? Is vetted, and that's one of my other concerns too, because a lot of people put up fake profiles so they can actually either pretend to be older than they are, or younger than they are. But I think that's the thing for me. But I encourage Roblox. I encourage the development of virtual world for young people, because young people need a place to grow, think, and feel as well. So I'm all for that. And given the fact that we are trying to come up with this COVID reality, I think that has saved a lot of young people, because we are born social. We're born needing to be touched. We are born needing to feel like we are part of a community. That is something no baby could grow on its own. So no child can grow on its own. So having a safe space to grow, learn, make money, and communicate is something that we need to encourage.
Dwayne, if I can add to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Christopher.
So for platforms like Roblox, of course, they're what are called world building games, where kids or anyone who's playing it are invited to create their own worlds and set up, using the game, their own communities. And it does fall very much in line with the metaverse being a shared virtual space that they can interact in. I 100% support children learning how to create content around Roblox. And I mean, yes, building the world itself, but also creating their own YouTube channels so that they can get followers Roblox. Because Roblox is one of the ways that our younger generation is way ahead of us. They have kids having hundreds of thousands of subscribers just from your Roblox channels. You have persons who are building their own games because of what they've been introduced to in these other games. And I think that is not just a good idea. If you got the thought that I think it's a good idea, it's not just a good idea, it's vital. Part of my responsibility here is I help lead an organization called Youth Can Do IT. And one of the things that we teach kids that are as young as 7 is game development. We teach them using a program called Scratch from MIT. And they will use drag and drop blocks to create these games. And they will create games that they're so proud that they share with their friends. And what we're teaching them is not just game development, it's how to build your own content and share it. It's not just about being on Instagram and pulling in content, but also being a content creator. And one of the things that we really try to encourage that for is we know that the next generation of programmers are persons who are game developers, persons who are in the gaming industry. Even now when I'm hiring for my workplace, I look for people who actually play games in their free time because it helps in software development, as many of you may know. But one of the things that we found is that when you are interacting with kids, and especially in Jamaica, not so much in Barbados, but especially in Jamaica, if I ask any kid, all right, who is your favorite reggae star? Say Bob Marley. All right, can you give me 5 steps to become the next Bob Marley? they'll say, well, you have to sing at church, and then you have to get found. Then you sing at a big event. And then after that, somebody finds you and they record you on their label. And then after that, you go global. And you say, okay, who's your favorite footballer? Leon Bailey, Messi. How do you become the next Messi? Well, you play on your field in your community. You sign up for your club at school. You find a professional club. You choose a specific place on the field if you want to be a goalie or if you want to be on the wings. And then you go big. You say you want to be a fast sprinter, it's the same thing. Everyone can find 5 steps between where they are now and being world famous. But what it is that they can't figure out is, how do you become the next best software developer? They'll say, what is a software developer? And that's the issue that we have. There's no track that we already have set up for kids to become content creators or content developers. And so things like being able to build your own game on scratch or using programs like Roblox are vital in understanding how to become a content creator in this digital space. So 100% for it. Not just for it, sorry, not just for it. It is vital that kids learn how to build in these game worlds if they're going to become the next generation leaders.
All right, Christopher, thanks for that piece. That was a very interesting look at it. And I think that for me, both times when you spoke about the footballers as well as the singers, basically you're just still operating on a luck and chance. You're basically saying, oh, I just hoping that somebody sees me, or just hoping that I get discovered, as opposed to now with the new metaverse where you can put out your, well, I mean, it's still going to be the same principle where you're hoping that you get discovered, but it's just that now you have a broader platform that you can use you can display your talents on. So that obviously now, because it is going to be a double-edged sword, because obviously now we can look at it that you can have content producers are going to be going on the metaverse and looking for that new Rihanna, that new Bob Marley, that new Egyptian, or as you said, that new Messi or Dwight York or whoever else it is. So they're going to be looking out there for these people, as opposed to somebody can make a call and say, you see this youth in Jamaica, he look good, you go fly down and come and watch him, scout him and look at a few games. So we can have to look at the whole ecosystem of what this can do as opposed to what used to happen before.
Absolutely. Powerful.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 8:24, and I think we had slated to finish this meeting like around 8:30. So Mr. Williams, Mr. Stephen, and Mr. Derrell, do you have any final words?
I guess you call me in first, I'll go first. Let me say that I hope this is the first of many engagements, not just by BIPA, but by, I guess, the wider Caribbean community, and maybe a couple of people on here from other Caribbean countries as well. I am absolutely tired of hearing about our potential. I'm tired of foreign direct investment, where companies come into the Caribbean, bring in wonderful jobs, where if they see another domicile, they take the jobs with them, and maybe if you're lucky, you can go with the company. We must reach the stage where we value our own effort, where there are those people who can put content up. Jeremy corrected me and said that there are some people who are trying stuff on the Nifty end, on the digital content creation end. Thanks for the correction, Jeremy. But it isn't widely known. You have to get a hook. You literally have to get a hookup. It isn't taught in schools, right? And unfortunately, that's the mass-based diffusion of information. I hate and there's a term my best friend in Miami states, why the government can't. Barbadians have a affinity with why the government can't. And he's right when he is tired of hearing Beijing say why the government can't. I am too. But I do not know, short of government intervention, what gets this country moving. I didn't get a chance to speak on it, but the metaverse will not create better service. The metaverse If you don't have good service practices to begin with, the metaverse will not make your service any better. If you're not innovative in your business in terms of even how you deliver internal communications and internal, I guess, business processes, the metaverse will not improve your business process. It will actually only seek to confuse it. I think that one of the bigger hurdles that we have to do is to start doing the basics right, and the metaverse will sort the rest out whenever you get there. Yes, it may be a sprint in some cases, but if you don't do the basics right, the metaverse is going to trip you up because you're going to miss some key points. And one of those key points are, do you have a website that creates new value, or you just putting up a page that says services about us, end of story? Even I may from time to time be guilty of that, but we must go beyond the basics and go beyond the lazy, because you have to think, how do I create new value for my customers, new value for my staff, new value from my business, to be able to say, you know what, I now have the basic understanding to really benefit from the metaverse, whatever that may look like 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Okay, Stephen, thanks for that. I saw Christopher had his hand raised, so I guess he can go next, or if he had something to add to your point.
Nothing to add for that. What I would end with is just the importance of making sure that we are educated, and not to just throw that word around, but meaning when it comes up and the metaverse is a topic of discussion, that you are not caught unawares, and that's not brand new to you. If you see persons around you, especially the younger persons, trying to get into it, that everyone on this call, especially those who have years of experience and a lot to share with the younger generation like me, do not be persons who push away or make it harder for them to learn. Encourage them to go into the technology so that we can be leaders. Education is really what's going to set us apart as a region, as Bajans, as Jamaicans, as a region, if we are going to be leaders and not followers in this area. And yeah, I definitely have to reinforce that it doesn't have to be something you need to fully understand, but you need to be able to understand enough of it that if you needed to get involved in it, it wouldn't be completely foreign to you. And encourage those around you who are interested to learn more about it. Don't be afraid of it because you don't understand the entirety of it. But that's really, I think that will be what separates us as we go forward. So God's blessings to everyone.
All right, thank you for that, Christopher. Jeremy, do you have any last words? And then finally, we would have a word from our president, Margaret.
Well, no, I thank you all for giving me time in a den full of IT people to make some kind of argument for the economic advantages that the metaverse will present. Thank you guys again.
All right, Margaret, any last
Yes,
words?
sir. Good night, everyone. I thank you very much for being a part of this conversation. And rightly so, each of the presenters have put themselves forward to continue this learning journey. As the term, as I started off by saying that it's a relatively new term that we are being exposed to, the populace of Barbados is being exposed to, and we know that there is a lot of gaming going on. We've been hearing about doing online transactions, using cyber currencies, cryptocurrencies, and so on. Trading, Christopher gave us the interesting scenario where I believe he probably figured he lost out after letting go of that. Letting go of that currency may be a bit too early. And from that, we at BIPA are hoping that you will continue the journey with us, because we know that we need to continue this conversation. I will continue to be reaching out. I see Christopher's hand is up. You can go, Christopher.
I think he's just giving a thumbs up.
Yes, and BIPA will be reaching out some more to Christopher Derrell Jr., Stephen Williams, and Jeremy Stephen to assist us in sharing and sensitizing, educating our populace some more. This year, BIPA is hoping to be more active in the space because a lot is happening. We are continuing to work remotely, and in addition to working remotely, we know that our children are also in the remote space as well as they continue to do their learning. And so we are going to step right into exposing persons more to cryptocurrencies. And we have next on our slate a series of workshops where Hallam Hope is going to be one of the main presenters going forward. We will be looking at cryptocurrencies from the perspective of understanding better what cryptocurrencies are, being able to trade, do some basic trades and things like that. So that is next up on the agenda. And also we will be continuing the conversation with the metaverse. We also want to have conversations on how persons in the technology arena can assist persons with disabilities. And disabilities are not just persons who are visually impaired or hearing impaired, because we have the elderly who are encouraged to do online transactions. This definitely is not their forte. They would have been very comfortable, even if it were to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be the first person on that queue. How do we accommodate an elderly person who has to share their banking information because they are given their card to someone who would now have access to their PIN to go and swipe and be that person who supposedly is assisting the elderly person? So we also want to look at those areas, and we know that blockchain is integral in all of these. So it continues to be a learning environment that the Barbados IT professionals want to continue as we go into 2022. So we will be reaching out to you. Feel free to send your contact information to President. I'm putting it in the chat, president@barbadosict.org. So this outreach that we are proposing is where we are hoping that we Barbadians can work, we Barbadians and regional persons, because we do have some persons here from the region. Chris Derrell Jr., for instance, he is speaking to us from Jamaica, and he has given us great insight as to some of what is happening in their cryptocurrency arena, be that as it may, in Jamaica, where the average individual is working to do their transactions and so on. So that is what we aim to do. No, we aim to reach out and have the conversation where we embrace the average individual out there. And so feel free to send your contact information. We are working to have a focus group, to maintain a focus group where we continue the conversation on the metaverse. We definitely got a lot of food for thought here this evening, and a lot of it is centered around our young persons and those who are elderly and so on. So we want to thank you very much for participating, and I will be looking for your contact information so that you will join Stephen, Christopher, and Jeremy so that we can continue the conversation, and do look out for our flyer as it relates to learning a bit more about cryptocurrencies. I thank you and do have a pleasant and peaceful night. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you. Same to you.
All right,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good
Thank you
night.
so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.